Caleb traced a silver finger over the crater's jagged rim and felt nothing. His gauntlet was 2 centimeters thick ceramite, but that wasn't why there was no tactile feedback. A quivering aura shimmered around every plate of his suit, a vibration null field so complete that the thin boil of lunar regolith under his boots could have exploded and he would have heard no sound, felt no tremor. He checked the field projector fixed to his collar. In the green, if it slipped even a fraction, the dark side Citadel's ultrasonic trip nets would taste the ripples and boil them alive with alarm drones. But for now, Caleb and the rest of the silent choir of Luna were undetectable, walking bubbles of muted physics. The choir had trained for half their lives to understand silence as more than the absence of sound. Silence was a weapon, as honed as a monomolecular blade, and tonight it would cut the throat of the Empyrean Virex. Virex was no ordinary tyrant. He had stolen the moon's far side, curled it into a fortress, and watched Earth from permanent shadow, threatening the mother world with strobing asteroid lasers. The choir alone could move through the Citadel's blind spots. Every other assault force the Terran League had hurled at the fortress had become charred ash within minutes, betrayed by vibration sensors so fine they could hear a snowflake land. Brother Orin signaled the squad with a gloved fist. The gesture produced neither click nor scrape. Even their armor's myomer fibers were laced with phase-opposite threads that devoured the acoustic ripples of movement. The precenter, hunch-shouldered in a mantle of polarized obsidian, drifted to the squad front. She did not speak, but her visor cast tiny glyphs onto Caleb's HUD. Form up range to gate, 880 M. Flower to Rockfield, Trank. Caleb slid down the inner wall of the crater. Dust billowed and burst in slow motion, catching solar wind like gray smoke, yet within the choir's percussive null halo, not a single grain rustled louder than quantum whisper. He landed beside Lice, whose helmet bore twin crimson slashes. Her eyes were the calm of deep space. She touched Caleb's forearm, solidarity, and angled her rifle toward the Citadel. Silhouetted against the half-lit horizon, the fortress looked less like architecture and more like a bruise carved into bedrock, a tumor of angled towers that swallowed starlight. They reached the trench gouged long ago by mining lasers. Its floor was littered with outdated sensor pods, gutted, their power cells long dead. The pods had once sung arias of ultrasonic pulses across the regolith. They were precursors to the new trip nets that surrounded the Citadel in kilometer-wide rings. The choir had mapped the nets down to the wavelength. Each projector tower pulsed at 80 kilohertz, weaving an overlapping cocoon. Anything that vibrated air or vacuum, given the nets used vibrational waves inside solid regolith particles, would ignite alarms. The choir's countermeasure was to erase everything. No footfall transmitted upward, no heartbeat stirred the inner plate of their arm. Instead they glided, exhaling measured streams that fed into microvent dampers. Caleb had done this drill in simulacra, but the reality was stranger. His body felt dislocated. He saw his limbs move but sensed no internal echo, no confirmation. It was like watching someone else wear his shape. Status, Orin signposted. Null integrity pristine. Pulsed back an encoded laser flicker. The beam ticked at fiber strands woven through the suits, not of their silent language. Across the squad, acknowledgement signals blossomed as tiny specks on Caleb's HUD. The presenter raised a single digit, then bended downward. Descend. A slab of basalt rose from the trench bed, revealing the first of the Citadel's maintenance culverts. The hatch above the culvert was a triple-locked iris. More importantly, an ultrasonic filament curtain guarded it, anchored by posts set 5 meters apart. The spacing left, a crawl space only 1 handspan tall, impossible for unarmored commandos, let alone warriors in powered ceramite. Except the choir did not intend to go over or under. They go through, ghosting past each filament by matching the lattice's nodal null points. Caleb clenched his jaw. The sequence was brutal. Step, tilt 6, micro-burst thrusters, pivot 3, spiral shoulders, slide foot, pulse forward. The choreography was mapped to timing so exact it made ballistic calculators look sloppy. Yet muscle memory swallowed fear. Calum advanced. The first filament was so thin it looked imaginary, but his suit's lidar sketched it in amber light. He found the node 1 of thousands where standing waves canceled each other and stepped in. The field around his armor pulsed and swallowed the tremor of his movement before it bled into the latter. A half-second later, he stepped out the far side. Lyse followed, eyes straight, breaths metronomic. Orin executed the crossing like a priest blessing altars. The precentaur floated last, robes rippling inside the null zone. They reformed on the hatch. Calum retrieved a photonic skeleton key, a shard of programmable crystal grown by choir artisans. He pressed it to the glyph ring. The hatch's AI expected biometric vibrations, a maintainer's heartbeat, encoded in percussive taps. The key provided the pattern, but not through the air. It braided the pattern directly into the metal, in canceling waves. The iris parted. Down they went, past coils of conduit, bleeding faint ion glow. The tunnel plunged into the fortress's root bones. Without an atmosphere, the silence was total. Yet Calum could not shake the sense that he was wading through a dream so hushed it might shatter if he exhaled wrong. At Junction Theta 7 they found bodies, Terran Marines, weeks old, curled like fetuses in carbon scoring. Their armor bore the sigil of the Selenic Dragoons. Helmets clawed open. It wasn't shrapnel. Ultrasonic resonance can liquefy bone before armor cracks. Virex defenses had used their own internal vibrations against them. Calum bowed his head to fallen comrades. The precenter paused only long enough to seal the memory in a data bead for future write. The choir's objective lay 2 clicks inward. The resonance crown, a ring of superconductive crystals atop the Citadel's central spire. The crown was the core of Virex's planetary threat system, able to sling coherent vibration across space and detonate asteroids before gravitational capture, toward targets on Earth. Destroy the crown and Virex Leviathan reach would shrink to nothing, but power crystals were hardy. They couldn't just plant a bomb, they had to reverse the lattice harmonics. That required entering the crown's heart and seeding counter-resonators. In effect, they would force the crown to cancel itself, a suicide chorus. They emerged into Shaft Gamma, a vertical void plunging 500 meters. Climbers would normally magnetize to the walls, but magnets would betray them. Instead, the squad fired piton wands that sank anchor threads of hypercarbon fiber. The lines were as thick as eyelashes. Calum clipped on and leaned backward into emptiness. His suit's musculature absorbed the weight, translating it into smooth descent. Again, no sound, no tremor. 60 meters down, the shaft walls lit with sudden glyphs, spider robots unfurling. Defensive drones. Chitinous plates vibrated at lethal KX, ready to scream, sonic blades. The drones had no optical sensors, vibration only. The choir froze mid-rappel. Calum counted 4 drones, maybe 6. They swept the shaft in graceful arcs, sending micropings into the stone. The null fields absorbed the echoes, so the drones perceived nothing. Yet the squad hung mid-air, exposed. Lyse traced 3 quick sigils. Bypass Vector West Alcove. 30 meters below was a maintenance alcove, too small for drones to patrol. They would drop in, wait until the swarm passed, then continue. Orin signaled yes. One by one, the commandos slid along their threads, angling sideways. As Calum veered, centrifugal shift tugged him against the harness. He felt the first true tingle in his spine since leaving the surface. Fear vibrated inside the chest cavity. No null field could reach. He made the alcove, bracing, boots on the lip. Lyse followed. The precenter drifted like black fog. Orin was last, and that was when a microscopic shard of detached cable spun away from his grapnel. It was nothing. A fleck of polymer no bigger than an ant. Yet in friction against airless stone it produced a vibration. 0.002 millinewtons. Too little for human ears. Enough for drone senses. One drone pivoted. Its thorax bloomed razors of vibrating glass. Callum's pupils shrank. He reached for the sonic stiletto holstered at his hip, a rod that projected counterphase pulses. But moving would generate vibration. He stalked his panic. The precentor tilted her head. Her visor gem let a narrow beam of coherent moonlight stab outward. The light, modulated, carried encoded silence. It struck the drone's carapace and fed a lullaby of null into its sensor dish. The machine hiccuped. Its blades halted mid-spin. Static tremored across its shell, as if confused by the absence of itself. Then it folded, drifting limp. The other drones took no notice. They glided upward, none the wiser. Orin unclenched. His thanks appeared as a soft glyph on the precentor's feed. They resumed descent, thread by thread, until they reached the shaft floor. There, a hatch opened into Corridor Argus, leading directly to the crown. For the first time, faint pressure trembled through Callum's boots. Air. The corridor was pressurized, meaning sound could propagate. Their null fields would help, but inside atmosphere the cost of error was steeper. They shifted settings, broadening absorption bands, but with each decibel eaten, the suit's heat load rose. Callum felt beads of sweat gather behind his neck seal. The corridor looked empty save for polished obsidian plates, but the choir's lidar revealed a storm of standing waves dancing between plates in ultrasonic maze. Walls projected notes that clashed into zones of annihilation and amplification. Walk into the wrong zone, you became pulp. Lice took point. She lifted a flake of scala foil and tossed it. The foil wafted like a butterfly, flaring gold, then dark, wherever waves collided. A path opened. A serpentine ribbon through the interference. The squad followed, stepping exactly where Lice stepped, each cadence measured. Every 10th stride she tossed another foil. Slowly, the Citadel's innards conceded. At corridor's end awaited a circular hatch, rimmed in photonic copper. A plaque read, "Absolute stillness is the first law." Ironic, Callum thought. Stillness was their creed. He placed the skeleton crystal. The hatch dissolved into petals, revealing the resonance crown chamber. The chamber was cathedral vast. A torus of crystalline loops hovered in magnetic suspension, humming light into rainbow shards. Tendrils of lightning crawled along rails. In the center, a throne chair of dull metal, Vyrex's control station. And in that chair sat the Empyrean. Callum's breath stalled. The mission brief had claimed Vyrex would be in orbit tonight, inspecting kinetic arrays. But here he was, kneeling rather than sitting, hands upon the floor, eyes closed. Around him, a mesh of filaments stitched his armor to the crown conduits. He was listening, Callum realized, to the moon itself, feeling every sigh of stone through exabyte augments. The tyrant was the fortress. Any displacement would thunder directly into his nervous system. Retreat was unthinkable. The choir had one chance. The precentor raised her hands, palms outward. She stepped into the chamber's silence field, a rival to their own, yet inverted. Her presence wrestled the sonic blankness. The crown flickered. Vyrex's head snapped up. He saw 6 shadows in pallid glow. His eyes were bottomless voids. He spoke. The word was not audible, but the chamber's resonators translated vibrating will into their helmets. "Heretics," it rang. "Choke on hush." He pressed his palms to the floor. The crown rippled, extruding blades of invisible sound aimed at the choir. Callum felt pressure billow, bones creaking. His null field strained, flux needles pigging red. Lies trembled, blood vessels popping in her eyes. Orin staggered, visor fracturing spiderweb. The precentor strode forward, her cloak shredding under pressure, yet her gaze unwavering. Her gauntlet lifted a black orb, the choir's final instrument, the anti-harmonic seed. It would anchor, bloom, and invert the crown, but only if someone affixed it to the central torus. That meant crossing the gulf where Virex will roared. Kylem's mind sprinted through angles. Virex controlled the entire resonance lattice, but control required focus. Distract him, and momentary slack would appear. Yet how distract a man who heard everything? By giving him something he could not ignore. Kylem switched suit output from null to overdrive, channeling stored vibrational energy into a single directed chord. His chest speakers had been quiet for hours, storing the hum of every absorbed impact. He pointed them at Virex and unleashed silence turned inside out, an antinote, perfect negation of sound. The blast wasn't loud, it was absence pushed so violently it ripped at eardrums. Virex gasped. For a heartbeat, his link to the crown fluttered. In that breath, Lyse dashed. Her suit's ankle plates cracked, but she kept running, seed in hands. Virex recovered, sending a whip of hyperfrequency at her, but Orin intercepted, throwing himself bodily into the wave, armor vibrating, till joints leaked molten alloy. He died standing. Lyse leapt, affixing the seed. A microspike fused to crystal. Immediately the torus's colors darkened, frequency grids tumbling unsynchronized. The seed unfolded petals of matte black, drinking vibrational energy. The crown wailed, but in silence. Virex shrieked, real sound this time, as existence he'd ruled betrayed him. He drew a pistol the size of a cannon, muzzle glowing. Kylem aimed his stiletto. Two beams met, visible only as air ripples. His blade of counterphase slid along Virex's bolt, splitting it. The weapon exploded, shearing the tyrant's arm. His scream turned to gargle. The precenter approached the fallen Empyrean. She removed her helm, revealing hair white as starlight. "No sovereign may claim the lullaby of Luna," she whispered. Then she pressed her palm to Virex's brow and sang, not with voice, but with the resonant quiet of orbital planes. Virex convulsed, arteries rupturing in stillness. He slumped, a puppet cut. The crown convulsed as the seed finished its meal. Crystalline torus cracked, lightning speared into the chamber ceiling. Alarms erupted. The choir's null shields couldn't stop structural collapse. The placenta signaled evacuation. Lyse sprinted to Orin's body, dragging him though knowing life had left. They retraced the corridor, waves now spiking unpredictably. One section detonated, blowing slabs into the path. Kylem punched through with amplified servo bursts. Air fled through ruptures, the corridor depressurizing welcome relief as sound collapsed again. They launched grapples upward to shaft gamma, ascending faster than freefall by reversing winch motors. Behind them the fortress rumbled, crown tearing gravity plates as it folded into itself. Drones spasmed, overloaded by contradictory symphonies. In the shaft's upper mouth, Kylem glimpsed a plume of crystal shards geysering through the Citadel roof toward the stars. The choir reached the culvert, scrambling out onto regolith. Above, Luna's curve bled sparkling debris. They sprinted across the crater, but the ultrasonic nets were in chaos, angles of interference twisting, their null fields burned reserves. By crater lip, Lyse collapsed. Kylem hoisted her over shoulder plates. The precenter slowed once, then resumed, every step weighed by the death ledger. They cleared the outer net just as a shock wave of dust chased them, mute, majestic. The Citadel's spire bent, folding like wax in solar glare. An avalanche of stone swallowed it. On the crater rim they stopped. Earth hung distant, marble blue. The precenter lifted a beacon torch, its light coated in silence. A signal to orbiting League vessels. Mission achieved. The tyranny of vibration was broken. Kalium set Lyse down. She breathed shallow, Bone's hairline fractured. He took her hand. She traced in his palm. Choir endures. The precenter looked to them, eyes carved with grief and pride. "We are echoes of stillness," she breathed, voice the barest whisper yet carrying across intersuit comms. "One day, all tyrants will learn the weight of quiet." Kylem gazed upon the ruins. In death, the Citadel had become truly silent, no longer the weaponized hush of oppression, but the gentle quiet that follows a lullaby. The moon's dark side had never felt so full of promise. Anonymous dust danced, untouched by sonic chains, and the choir of Luna stood witness, armored ghosts guarding the sacred hush between worlds.